Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. It's funny, we haven't spoken for some years, but it's something like our 18th interview or something. Uh,
Wow.
it feels like talking to to an old friend. So, Mike, let's not waste our time because I have so many things to ask you, my friend.
Okay.
Um, uh, do you feel that that Parasomnia is a new scenes from a memory, meaning that after a Liquid Tension experiment album, you entered a new era of Dream Theater back in '99. Did you see Liquid Tension 3 as a real experiment to see how was your chemistry again with John and Jordan after all these years?
Yeah, I mean, the similarities in terms of the dynamic and you know, the timeline is it is very similar. Um, like you could look at Liquid Tension 2 was kind of the bridge that brought Jordan into Dream Theater. And then Liquid Tension 3 was kind of like the bridge that brought me back to Dream Theater. So in some ways that comparison is true. But I also, I mean, I've said this in other interviews, and I really feel it's true, is I felt a very similar excitement during these sessions that reminded me a lot of making scenes from a memory and also a lot of making images and words. Because in both of those cases, images and words and scenes from a memory, we were uh, dealing with a new lineup change. Images was the first album with James in the band, and
Mhm.
Scenes was the first album with Jordan in the band. And making Parasomnia had a very similar inspired energy because it was, the first album with me back in the band. So I think in all these cases, you could really feel that energy. We were just very, very inspired and up for the challenge and rising to the occasion.
What was the dynamic like working with James, John, and Jordan again after so many years?
Well, it was like no time had passed, to be honest.
Mhm.
It felt immediately comfortable and immediately familiar. And it felt more like returning home to like to family, coming home, like a family reunion. Um, but the work dynamic and the creative dynamic was really no different than it's always been. I mean, even dating back to writing the Majesty demos, 40 years ago. The
Mhm.
the way that we write has always been very consistent. And this album, even though it's our 16th album, it was really the same kind of process. But yeah, we were very just inspired. And I will say the one thing that's different is we're different. We're older, we're wiser, we're more experienced. The
Yeah.
last time we made a record together was 2009. So 15 years had passed. And back then I was in my early 40s and now I'm in my late 50s. So
Yeah.
obviously, age and experience have, I think, you know, really come off with the way we function now and work now.
Mhm. The album Parasomnia goes full circle, meaning that its end marks its beginning as well. It goes full circle.
I don't think so. I think it's more, there's a definitive beginning and an ending. I mean, if you look at the Octavarium album, that literally goes full circle and ends where it
Mhm.
begins. But in this case, the album begins with the listener getting into bed and going to sleep. And
Yeah.
the album ends with spoiler alert here, but if you
Yeah.
haven't heard
Wake
the
up.
album,
It's wake up. It's just like open your eyes, Nicholas.
well, it's a little different because in this case, you're waking up, the listener's waking up from a night's sleep, and everything that you just experienced over those 70 minutes was what the listener experienced while dreaming. And obviously, Parasomnia is about uh, essentially like what happens when you're sleeping, and it's a perfect, subject matter for a band named Dream Theater. It makes perfect sense. But yeah, I think it's not coming full circle. It's more uh, the start
Ending.
and the ending of your night's sleep, and everything that happens in between is what happened that
Yeah.
particular night.
hmm We hear familiar lines like strange deja vu in the songs. We hear a repeating melody all over the album that reminds me of some variations of Love Story, to tell you the truth. What do you have to say on this?
Well, those are two different subjects.
Yeah, let's start
Uh,
taking one by
the
one.
Well, the first is the lyrical references, and that was just more me having fun
Mhm.
with the lyrics to Midnight Messiah and referencing some of my past lyrics to, you know, so that, the lyrical references were more fun than anything and more
Yeah.
just kind of planting nuggets for the fans to dig into.
Mhm.
And, my lyrics to Midnight Messiah are almost metaphoric to my experience coming back to Dream Theater. So that's why I utilize those little nuggets. But the other subject matter is the musical references, and that's obviously very intentional when you're writing a concept album. This is a concept album like thematically, not necessarily in terms of a story with characters, but it's a thematic conceptual album, the way like the second disc of Six Degrees of Inner Turbulence is, or Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. But in any case, when you're making an album that is conceptual, one of the fun tools that you get to utilize is bringing musical themes and melodies back and forth, foreshadowing them, then bringing them back with reprises and, kind of maybe playing them in different keys or different tempos or different instrumentation. And it's a fun way of writing. I've done many concept albums at this point, not only with Dream Theater, but
Mhm.
with Neil Morse Band and Transatlantic. And that's one of the tools is kind of having those musical motifs that jump around from song to song. And that was something that I suggested early on to make this be an album like. And it's nothing new for Dream Theater. If you look back to Images and Words, Wait for Sleep is foreshadowing a musical theme that appears in Learning to Live. Or if you look at Awake album, The Mirror has one of the musical themes from Space Divest in it. So it's a fun way of writing.
Yeah, yeah. I wanted to see if there's something intentional because the main theme reminds me of the theme of Love Story.
Of which Love Story?
Yeah.
That I'm not sure about.
Yeah.
Love.
Okay. Okay. So that's noted. Okay.
Yeah.
Uh, um, Starting from Since from Memory, you and John Petrucci had been producing the Dream Theater albums till the time you left. After that, John took over alone. Now that you are back, you are not involved in the production of Parasomnia. As named at least as a producer, why did you take this decision as a group?
Well, to be honest, it was one of the very first things that John Petrucci brought up to me when the two of us began discussing the possibility of me coming back. There were a lot of things that happened while I was away that they wanted to remain intact, and that was one of the things that was very important to John was to maintain the sole producer credit. And what can I say to that? Would I have liked to have reunited the production team the way it always was? Yeah, I would have. But the reality is, when he brought that up to me, and uh, I needed to respect that. When I left the band, we were producing the albums together, and after that, he began producing on his own. So obviously, over the last five albums, that was the way that the band functioned.
Hmm.
Uh, if that's very important to him, then I need to respect that. I can't just come back into the band and demand things to be the way they used to be. It's impossible. We're
Yeah, of
not the
course.
same people, and things have transpired over a decade and a half at this point. So I needed to be respectful of his request for that, and that's pretty much it in a nutshell. But to be honest, it didn't dilute any of my ideas. All of my ideas were always welcome, and some of the things that I did suggest, like the conceptual thematic stuff, that a lot of that stuff falls under the category of producer. But if John wants the sole credit, that's totally fine,
Hmm.
because all that meant for me is that I don't have to be in the studio 24/7 babysitting the keyboard tracks or the bass tracks, and that's fine with me. I live 3 hours away, so I was more than happy to delegate that all to John and be able to get home and spend a little time with my family here and there.
Yeah. I guess one of one of the other things that were discussed before entering the Dream Theater again was the setlist thing.
Hmm.
And um, even though you were back, you still played the same set list every night, which is normal, to tell you the truth. The abnormal was changing it, like
Right.
you had been doing. Is there any chance that the past habit might return someday?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I was writing different set lists for every single show, at that point we had been touring for, 20 years or whatever it was at that point. So it was more to keep it exciting, not only for the fans, but for ourselves as well. Now coming back after all this time, you know, we just wanted to have some time where we could get our tour legs back and get comfortable again with each
Mhm.
other and get very, very comfortable playing these songs together again before we start shaking it up. So right now the set list is static, and I think it works for the 40th anniversary tour because I think it's a set list that we really want everybody to experience. So for the first few legs, uh, it will remain the same until we've played all these markets. And then once we start getting to repeat markets, that's when we'll start to shake it up. And as time goes on, the set will get changed more and more. We just wanted to have some time to just get comfortable again together.
Mhm. Once again, you worked with Hugh Syme on the cover. What did you have in mind when you approached him, and was the final result something that satisfied you 100%?
Well, that was one area that has been delegated back to John since I left the band.
Mhm.
That was one area prior to 2010. I always oversaw the artwork and dealt with the outside artists, whether it be Hugh Syme or Storm Thurgerson or whoever. So once again, that was another area like the producer credit that John had taken over in my absence and wanted to remain in charge of. So really, that's a question for him. But was I happy? Am I happy with the final results? Yeah, I think the artwork layout. I don't know if you've seen the whole layout or if you've only seen the cover, but I think it's really. I think Hugh Syme did a great job capturing the mood of this album. It's a very dark album, dealing with a lot of nightmares and things like that. So when you see the full layout, I think Hugh Syme really captured it. I think John did a great job overseeing it. So yeah, once again, it's just another area that was delegated into his lap and during my hiatus, and I needed to respect that.
Um, did it feel strange performing live Dream Theater songs played by another drummer? And which were the criteria under which the band chose This Is a Life and Barstool Warrior?
Well, for starters, the band didn't choose those songs. With me being back in charge of the set list, that falls under every category, from the songs to the sequence to the house music that plays before and after. So,
Hmm.
as part of me doing the set list, I kind of oversaw that, and
Uh-huh.
that even included choosing the songs from the albums I wasn't on. They gave me full full freedom to go back to those albums and give them a listen and find songs that that I felt comfortable with. In answer to your question, what was the criteria? Um, I had to, I listened to those albums with an open ear, but I was really trying to connect to songs that moved me and songs that I really felt, melodic and I felt some sort of connection to on a thematic and a melodic level. Songs that I could picture myself playing and it would sound comfortable and sound like it was part of this lineup. I wasn't really looking for what songs were the most technical or the difficult or what were easy for that matter. It was just for songs that moved me. And the two that I chose were songs that I really felt were well written,
Hmm.
melodic songs that just, they spoke to me. And we'll see down the road, what songs I continue to choose. I did my homework and went through those five albums and made a list of the songs that spoke to me. Over time we'll see which ones get put in the set list. And the final part of your question was it weird for me to be playing that songs that I didn't perform or write?
Yeah.
No, because I've been doing it my whole career, whether it be touring with Avenged Sevenfold or Twisted Sister, I've made a career out of coming into bands and playing drum parts that were written by other drummers, and I needed to get in there and respect them and even playing Spock's Beard songs with Neil Morse, so I've been doing it my whole career, and it's something that I'm very comfortable doing.
Your anniversary tour was really an emotional roller coaster, as we told you in the beginning. For you personally, more than the others, as you lost Samantha and Mikey, and plus the emotional burden of being back with your old friends. It must have been too harsh. However, I feel that the love that you got from your bandmates and the fans has been overwhelming. Do you believe that too?
Yeah, it's been incredible. It's been an emotional roller coaster. I mean, with some of the highest of highs um, I've ever had in my career, some of the biggest and best, most emotional shows I've ever played. Each and every night, you could feel the love and the passion and the emotions from the fans. It wasn't only the first show in London, it was literally every night, every place we played, and it will continue to be that way even until we get to Greece for the first time in the summer. Those kind of emotions are going to be at each and every show. But yeah, as you mentioned, I had a couple of personal losses that really made it really, really difficult as well, with some of the lowest of lows I've ever felt as well. So it's been an emotional roller coaster. But as you mentioned, the support of the band and the crew and our fans made it really possible for me to be able to get through those hard times. Really, the music and the fans helped lift me each and every night for those 3 hours. And for 3 hours every night, I was able to kind of escape the sorrow that I was feeling the other 21 while I was off stage.
Yeah. But back in the days, while playing in with Dream Theater, you also had a few other projects. Shall we see you in any of them in the future? And if you had to pick one, which would it be?
Well, time will tell which one of these bands and projects survive, which ones will still be standing on the other side of the reunion. Right now, my focus is on Dream Theater, and that's going to remain my focus for quite some time because there's no foreseeable end to the current world tour. It could conceivably still continue into 2026 at this point, so we'll see. Once there's some time off, then time will tell which projects remain. Um, in answer to your questions, which would I choose to remain, or
Yeah,
however
yeah,
you worded it?
yeah. If you were to pick one,
If
what
well,
would
right now, I mean, I feel my biggest commitment is to Neil Morse because he and I have three bands together. So honestly, I feel the biggest commitment to him. Uh, and of the three bands we have, I feel the biggest commitment would be to the Neil Morse band. I think that's the one band where everybody really just loves making music together. And we have such a great personal relationship within all the members of that band. It's a very loving group of guys. So we'll see. We'll see. Time will tell.
Mhm.